There's always been an active speedrunning community for the original Resident Evil 2, but it's experienced a bit of a resurgence lately after the release of the cutscene and door skip mod, which cuts the runtime literally more than in half. After seeing that the game can now be completed in under 20 minutes, I decided I had to try to learn this run. But one part of the run I've been struggling with is quick shots. As you might expect, quick shooting is a technique for firing your weapon faster than normal, and it's possible in all of the first 3 Resident Evils. There are a number of guides on how to do it on speedrun.com, Discord, and YouTube. The basic idea is that instead of the normal way to fire, where you hold down the aim button and press shoot, you do the opposite. After firing one shot normally, you hold down the shoot button and rapidly press aim. If done correctly, you'll find your character firing much faster than normal. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as it sounds. The timing is very tight, and even the best runners drop quick shots from time to time. And I am not one of the best runners. I wanted a better understanding of exactly how this technique works and exactly what I was doing wrong, so I decided to dig into the game to find out. I doubt I'm the first person to do this, but I haven't personally seen a detailed description of exactly how and why this technique works, so I thought I would make this video to record what I learned and what I've taken away from it. Okay, so here I've got RE2. The most popular speedrun category is Leon A, so I'm playing as Leon here, and in the Leon A speedrun the only weapons used are the handgun and the Magnum, so I'll be focusing on those. My keyboard is in the corner, I have aim bound to I and shoot bound to J. In the background I've got a debugger that's watching the game for us to do something with our weapon, and when we do, it'll display some information about what's going on. Right now nothing's happening because I'm not doing anything with my weapon in game, but if I press the aim button, now we see things popping up. There are a few different pieces of information here. The first one is state. There are 4 states to be aware of. State 0 means we're raising our weapon, State 1 means we're aiming our weapon, State 2 means we're firing our weapon, and State 3 means we're lowering our weapon. The next is keys, which indicates which keys on the keyboard or buttons on the controller are pressed. For our purposes, we only care about this 4th digit. If the 4th digit is a 1, that means the aim button is currently pressed. If the 4th digit is a 0, that means the aim button is currently not pressed. And lastly, we have anim frame. We only care about this for state 2 because that's when the weapon firing animation is playing. When that animation is playing, the anim frame will tell us how many frames the animation has been playing for. Now that we understand these data points, let's try firing a shot. When I first press aim, we're in state 0 as we bring our weapon up. Once the weapon's been raised, we're in state 1 because we're aiming, and we'll stay in that state as long as I keep holding the aim button. Once I press the shoot button, we move to state 2. After the shot animation finishes, we return to state 1, and once I let go of the aim button, we move to state 3. And once Leon finishes putting his gun down, we're not in a weapon animation anymore, and we stop getting information in the log. Now let's look at what happened when we were in state 2, so when the gun was firing. If we look at the frame counter, we see it starts at 0, then counts up 1 per frame until the end of the animation, which is at frame 16. That's 16 in hexadecimal, so in normal decimal numbers that's 16 plus 6, which is 22. And we started counting at 0, not 1, so the total number of frames is 22 plus 1. So that means that the shot animation for the handgun lasts for 23 frames. Now let's try to fire multiple shots in a row and see what that looks like. I'm just going to hold in, aim, and shoot here. If we look at these shots in the log, we see that we're in the firing state for 23 frames, then we go back to the aiming state for a single frame, and then we start the next shot, and the cycle repeats. So taking into account the 1 frame in the aiming state, that means that if you're just shooting the handgun normally by holding aim and either holding or spamming the shoot button, you will fire 1 shot every 24 frames. Now let's try something different. I'm going to fire one shot again, but this time I'm not going to hold the buttons down. As soon as I shoot, I'm letting go of the buttons. If we look at the frame count now, we'll see something different. We only counted up to frame 9 while in the firing state. Again, taking into account the fact that we start counting at 0, that means the firing animation only lasted 10 frames this time instead of 23. Why is that? Well, it's because the game has a mechanic where you can bail out of the shooting animation early by putting your gun down. Every gun in the game has a minimum number of animation frames it has to play that can't be interrupted. But if at any point after it's played that many frames, the aim button isn't down, it'll immediately exit the animation. Let me show you another example. I'm going to fire a shot with the aim button held, but then release it towards the end of the shoot animation. So this time we had 20 frames play, again converting from hexadecimal, which is less than the normal 23, but more than the 10 we got last time. And if we look at the state of the keys, we can see why. Remember, the fourth digit of the keys is 1 if the aim button is pressed and 0 if it isn't pressed. So if we look at the keys, we can see the aim button is pressed, so the firing animation is playing, 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 until we get down here to the 20th frame, which is when I let go of the button. And as soon as I let go, since we're past the minimum number of 10 frames, we immediately exit the firing animation. But there's one crucial detail here. When we stop aiming, we should expect to go to state 3, which is the animation of Leon lowering his weapon, and we do see that here. But for a single frame between leaving state 2 and entering state 3, we end up in state 1, the aiming state. And that's why quick shots work. Because if you have aim and shoot pressed on that specific frame, you'll fire another shot instead of putting your gun down. So with the 10 minimum frames of firing plus 1 frame of aiming, that means if you do it perfectly, you can fire 1 shot with the handgun every 11 frames instead of 24 frames. So it's more than twice as fast. But if you don't manage to repress the aim button on that specific frame, you go to state 3, which can't be interrupted. So you'll have to wait for Leon to put his weapon down and then raise it back up before you can fire again. That's what we would call a dropped quick shot. Let me also quickly show how it works with the Magnum, the other weapon used in the Leon aim run. The concept is exactly the same, but the Magnum has different timing than the handgun. The full Magnum animation, if you hold aim the whole time, is 36 frames. The minimum time if you release aim is 27 frames. So a perfectly executed Magnum quick shot saves 9 frames, which is actually less than the 13 frames saved with the handgun, although still significant. Okay, let's talk about techniques. The advice I've seen is, after firing your first shot, hold shoot and repeatedly mash aim. I assume this works for players who can do it consistently because they're able to press the button fast enough to toggle it on and off every frame. If you can do it, that's guaranteed to work and be at most 1 frame slower than optimal, because you've got leeway as to when you trigger the end of the firing state, as long as you then repress the aim button the very next frame. Like, let's take a look at the full Magnum cycle. All these first 26 frames are part of the uninterruptible portion of the animation, and the last 10 frames are part of the interruptible portion of the animation. And you're probably thinking to yourself, wait, didn't you just say 27 frames a minute ago? Yes, the minimum animation time is 27 frames. You will always see at least 27 frames of the Magnum animation, even if you perfectly time your quick shot. But the 27th frame is the first frame where we can trigger the animation to end by not pressing the button. So I'm counting that as part of the interruptible portion of the animation. So up here in the uninterruptible portion, it actually doesn't matter what you do with either the aim button or the shoot button. You can be holding them, mashing them, pressing one but not the other, pressing neither of them. It won't make any difference. But once we get down here into the interruptible portion, we can bail out of the animation on any of these 9 frames by not having the aim button pressed. And again, if you're thinking, isn't it 10 frames? Well, the animation is going to end after this 10th frame regardless, because that's the end of the animation. So you're not actually saving any time if you wait until this 10th frame to let go of the button. But that's what I mean by having leeway. If you're holding the aim button at the beginning of the shot, obviously we want to let go of it exactly on this 27th frame for the optimal quick shot, but you can let go of it anywhere in this 9-frame window and still be saving time, as long as you repress it on the very next frame. So it's really just pressing the button that's frame perfect, not letting go of it. And so here's my suggestion. Particularly for the Magnum, you really don't need to be hammering the aim button the whole time. Like 26 frames is close to a full second. So what I've found more success with is just holding the aim button from the time of the muzzle flash until I see the Magnum get to the right point in its animation, and then I start hammering aim. And once I see the next muzzle flash, or more likely screw it up, I start holding aim again, etc. You might save your fingers a little not having to mash as much. So what is the right point in its animation? I'm guessing you can't count 27 frames in your head, so let's slow the animation down and look for a visual cue. I use the debugger to stop the game on exactly the first frame of the animation, so we can go frame by frame and count when we want to try to quick shot. So right here, when the Magnum reaches this point in its animation, this is when I start hammering. Now let's look at the handgun. 10 frames is a lot shorter than 27, so honestly I haven't had much luck trying to time the animation. I just hammer constantly. But just for reference, let's see what it looks like. So right here is the point in the handgun's animation where you would want to trigger the quick shot. I also want to mention one thing regarding the shoot button. Both aim and shoot need to be pressed on the one perfect frame to trigger a quick shot, but what you're doing with the shoot button outside of that frame doesn't matter. So if you want to, you can actually hammer both aim and shoot instead of holding shoot. Like here's me trying to quick shoot the Magnum the normal way by holding shoot and mashing aim. And here's me trying to quick shoot by mashing shoot and aim simultaneously. I prefer just mashing aim, but it can be done either way. It's not necessary at all, there's no benefit to it, and for most people I wouldn't recommend it. But if for some reason you like that better, you can do it that way. Finally, I did want to show Claire, even though we're focusing on Leon. The timing for Claire's handgun is exactly the same as Leon, so I'm not going to show that again, but the grenade launcher does have its own timing, and if you're wondering, the timing is the same no matter what type of rounds are loaded. So if we do a full cycle, that's 39 frames. The shortest cycle, that's 28 frames. And finally, let's look at it in slow motion. So there is the ideal frame to release aim. Okay, we've looked at the release timing for all the weapons. Now let's talk about press timing. I recorded most of this video a few weeks ago, so let me show you one of my attempts to do some quick shots here at that time with my earlier technique. We can see on the last shot when I dropped it, I released the aim button for 2 frames instead of 1. I repressed it on the 3rd frame, but that's too late. In the beginning, this was the cause of nearly 100% of my failures. I just couldn't consistently press the button again within 1 frame of releasing it. But now it's been a few weeks, and I've got another 100 attempts or so under my belt, and I've switched up my technique. First, I rebound aim to J because my index finger rests on J and I find it easier to mash with my index finger. Secondly, since we know the repress needs to be frame perfect and I was struggling with pressing the button again in that amount of time, I asked myself what I could do to help reduce the time it takes to press the button, and I figured the easiest way to reduce the time was to reduce the distance my finger needs to travel. So now when I mash, I try to lift my finger the bare minimum amount for the game to see the key is not pressed anymore. My finger never actually breaks contact with the keyboard. I've had way more success with this technique, and it's got a secondary benefit too, because most of the time when I fail now, not all of the time, but most of the time, it's because I didn't lift my finger enough and the game never registered that the aim button was released. And that means that instead of dropping the gun and having to pick it back up, I fail the quick shot, but the gun stays aimed, giving me another chance to get a late quick shot, or, worst case scenario, just fire a normally timed shot. So even my failures are faster with this technique. Let me try some quick shots with my current technique. So I did drop it eventually, but before I dropped it, I got 6 good quick shots. And the Magnum only holds 8 rounds, so considering that the first shot is always a normal shot, 7 quick shots in a row is the most you'll ever need to do. I'll try it with the handgun as well. I find it a lot harder with the handgun, and that was obviously not as clean. You could see the timing vary a lot from shot to shot. But the most handgun quick shots you should ever need to do in a row is 4, which would be with the worst zombie health RNG on the bus, so that's very doable. And that's everything I know about quick shots in RE2. Feel free to leave a like if you found this helpful or interesting, subscribe if you want to see more retro games get dissected, and I'll see you next time.